Today's AskReddit post. Babysitters of Reddit. Was there a time you had to call the police on the parents of the child you babysat? So what happened? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. Yes, she had baby formula next to a meth pipe on the counter. I was young and couldn't get the baby to stop crying, so I called her and she sent some random girl over. The random girl revealed that there was a toddler asleep in the back that I didn't know about. I told my mom and she called CPS and the cops. Turns out the woman had like 2 or 3 more kids that she wasn't allowed to see. What? How do you leave a whole extra child with a babysitter and not tell them? My mom ran a day home when I was 5 or 6. One of the kids, who was a few years older than me, kept trying to play a game with other kids where they get naked under the covers. He also kept crapping his pants. Like every day. My parents talked to him about it and wound up calling the equivalent of Child Protective Services on the parents. It turned out his mom's new boyfriend was molesting him basically every day. It broke my parents' hearts. I'm not sure what happened to him after that. I hope he's doing okay. Edit. My mom stopped running her day home after that and went into teaching adults. She had a master's in early childhood development but says she couldn't bear to be the caretaker for children anymore. Having to tell that boy's mother what she suspected was happening broke her a little. That's so terrible and heartbreaking. But I'm so glad your parents called CPS. Hopefully he is in a better living situation now. When I was young, my babysitter had to call the police twice. Once because my mom, who had limited visits with us 3 kids, came banging on her door to get us and take us who knows where. Babysitter hid us in a closet and called the cops. Second time was when we were playing hide and seek in the apartment courtyard and my brother took hide and seek a little too seriously. He refused to come out from his hiding spot and then some person said they saw him leaving with a strange man. Finally, after the cops showed up, he came out from under some bushes proud that not even the cops could find him. LOL, your brother sounds like a little poop, but I'm glad he was okay. I would had panic the second I couldn't find him. Kids love scaring us. Oh my fucking god, where did he go? Haha, bushes make me go bye. My parents had CPS called on them when I was a baby because I had really bad diaper rash that bled a bit. And the way my diaper absorbed the blood made it look like way more than there actually was, so she thought I was being intercorsally abused. CPS had a doctor examine me and determined that I wasn't being intercorsally abused, and that was all. My mom told me about it in my 20s. That's awful. But also I'm really glad that they took it further just to be sure. It must have been dreadful for your parents at the time though. Yeah, I was a fun baby. I had to be airlifted to bigger hospital with my mom right after I was born. But for real, I use it as an example of how a CPS false alarm won't ruin a person's life. Even a real CPS alarm won't ruin a person's life or help the kids. It won't help the kids. Don't bother is a pretty poop-tea message. Years ago I babysat 2 kids, 10 and 7. The 10-year-old was threatening us and threw his little sister out of the house. I followed and he locked us both out. Wisconsin winter. No shoes. It was near home. So I brought the girl to my place. But couldn't leave a crazy kid alone. So I returned and he let me stay with him until parents returned. This was before cell phones. I was paid $1 an hour. Tops. No apology. No sugary sodas. No maraschino cherries in the door of the fridge. Parents were wealthy. A couple years later the boy set fire to himself. I regret not doing more. But honestly, I'll never understand why his parents didn't do more. I like how they felt the need to specify their kids couldn't have maraschino cherries. Edit. It has been brought to my attention that this maraschino cherries was a metaphor. That makes a lot more sense than what I was thinking. I thought it was the babysitter who couldn't have soda or cherries. IDK, it's worded weirdly. Even if you're right, that's still a weird thing to specify. Grammatically it looks like no maraschino cherries may be placed in the door of the fridge, but I'm pretty sure it's not that. I took it as they didn't even have the cherries in the fridge, which was something they might have sneaked a few of at other houses. As if to say this house didn't even have anything fun to redeem the situation. No, but their neighbors called the police on me. I used to babysit triplets just down the road from a grocery store and the parents asked me to pick some stuff for them. They paid me a little extra for running the errand. Well, one of the neighbors called the police and accused me of kidnapping the kids. One family I used to babysit for decided to give me money to take their toddler to McDonald's instead of feeding him at the house. Besides the fact that I had to walk him halfway across town. Our town was just big enough that everyone I saw that day didn't know me, so they all thought I was a teen mom, and I got so many judgmental looks. I was 18 with 3 identical toddlers. I feel your pain regarding the judgmental looks. I really wish parents would think of that when they tell babysitters to take their kids places. I wish people would think of that when they immediately assume young women with children are teen moms instead of siblings or babysitter. Don't know if this counts, but I used to work at a summer camp when I was a teenager. About once a week we would all walk down the street to the community outdoor pool. There were 2 girls, 5 and 8, who were very shy and stuck to themselves a lot. We only had them for about 3 days at this point. I tried to include them in games, but it was like they didn't see anyone around them and just lived in their own bubbles. One day when we were getting ready to go to the pool, I was helping some of the younger kids put sunscreen on their backs. I remember asking the younger girl if I could help her and she nodded. When I lifted up the back of her shirt to get her shoulders, she was absolutely covered in bruises and what I guess were cigarette burns. Every inch of her back. It was the most horrifying thing I'd seen at that point in my life. I was 16 myself, so I went to my boss and showed her the girl's back. Her older sister was exactly the same. We ended up calling the police and they came and got the girls that afternoon. The shape of the bruises almost looked like whip marks, like they were whipped with a belt until it left insane bruises. It was so sad. Never saw those girls again. I've been babysitting since I was 12. Worked in daycare and I'm currently a nanny. I have called the police on a family I babysat twice. I've also filed a couple of CPS reports, but in my experience those didn't go anywhere. First time I called the police was because the child's mother didn't come home. She was supposed to be home by 1 AM but just never came back. Parents are late a lot, so it wasn't that big of a deal until the sun started rising. Grandma picked up the baby and the cops found mommy passed out drunk by some bar. She did not hire me again. Second time was because when I was changing a diaper it was clear the toddler had been intercourseally assaulted. I'm not going to say how, but it was obvious. I almost think her dad wanted me to see because he was still there when I called the police, and it was just so obvious. It was a total poop show. Unfortunately, the child's mother got custody even though she definitely enabled the behavior. Dad was arrested at least. The dad did it and watched you call the cops to arrest him? Some pedophiles know they are sick and want to be put away, but don't have the decency to turn themselves in. Alternatively, power move. Look at what I did, and you can't do anything about it. Fortunately, he was very wrong about that. Jesus duck. This entire comment chain has my skin crawling. I'd like to think I would immediately call the police as well, but I'm not lying. I think I'd also be terrified that if someone is willing to intercourseally assault their own child, they're willing to physically hurt me in the heat of the moment. So I feel like OP is also extremely brave. Yes, very brave. He could have assaulted her as well. Oh, and one time my sister was babysitting for our French teacher and her ex-husband stormed in and passed out drunk on the couch, and she had to call the police because he was not supposed to be there. Yikes. That's a lot. It's better than the woman we babysat for that handed us a baseball bat and said to use it if her ex-boyfriend came back. We didn't babysit for her after that. And X200B. The summer I was 17. I was recommended to babysit for this family with 2 young boys, 7/8 and 11/12. I showed up for my second day like I did the day before, and the mom left to go to work. The younger boy was arguing with the older boy because he wanted to play on his iPhone. The older one was telling him that he couldn't play. I thought we were alone in the house. All of a sudden an angry large man walks down the stairs and starts yelling, "Hunter, give me your phone or I'm going to whoop you." I did not know that the dad was home. He came down without acknowledging me and whacked the younger boy so hard, I froze. I was scared he was going to hit me. He just had that angry look in his eyes. The dad never once introduced himself to me and no one ever told me that the dad would be home. And X200B. I almost called CPS once. I ended up telling the boy's friend's mom to watch out for them and explained what happened. She said that she has never met the dad. He never comes to the kids' soccer or baseball games. I was babysitting a 5-year-old. I let him download an app and said if your parents say to take it off you have to listen. I went to the bathroom when the parents came home. Once I got out of the bathroom I saw his dad punch him in the stomach about 13 times yelling, "I told you not to download apps." I called the cops. They came. I didn't babysit that family again. This isn't personal experience but this was told by my friend. So, we have FM equals friend's mum and C equals child. So FM was a babysitter. She had constantly looked after one kid as their parents had a lot of work to do. One time, the C asked what consent was, and then FM explains it all and everything. And at the end, FM said it's always okay to say no to intercourse. I think we can see where this is going but just in case you don't. The child then said even to family? Jesus Christ. After that, the kid was taken by an adoption center and the parents were arrested. Glad to hear that part at least, but holy duck. I hate to say it but the foster system isn't any better. If that kid ever saw a group home it probably got worse. Not quite what was asked, but one time a small tornado hit next to our house while the babysitter was at our house. I got a frantic call from the babysitter where she kept repeating, "Your tree is in the driveway." It must have been pretty scary as the tree barely missed the house. We headed home immediately but it took forever because trees were down all over the neighborhood and all the traffic lights were out. We tipped generously. The toddler was completely unfazed and having a great time playing with flashlights. Reverse story here. When I was around 8 I called the police while being babysat. What was the reason for that, you may ask? Simply because I wanted to see what happens when you call the police. I immediately hung up when the dispatcher answered and no more than 10 minutes later a policeman showed up at our house. Our poor babysitter must have been scared to death. But she handled it well. I did get a lecture after that to only call the police if there's an emergency. My little cousin did that while I was babysitting them. Hated to open the door. BC the 4 little cousins were staying on a mattress on the living room floor. Right in view. And there was junk everywhere. BC we had just moved in before my fooding relatives dropped their kids off with no notice. Not for the first time. Sigh. Looked like a war zone. The police looked at me. The 5 kids. My brother is a lot younger than me. And then back at me. I don't even know what they were thinking. This is not an answer to your question, but somewhat related. My partner knew a family that hired a teenage girl to babysit their 3 young children. She was exhausted from schoolwork and at some point fell asleep. 2 of the children, 2-3 years old, managed to get outside, and both drowned in a small pond. I don't know what happened to the babysitter or the family afterwards. So sad. Oh god, that's awful. Thank the Lord no for me having to. Neighbor called the cops on me though cause my son ran outside while I was going poop twice because he learned how to unlock the door. We installed better, higher locks now, but hadn't at the time and it was scary, but I am kinda grateful it did. Lets me know someone was watching out for him. I'd rather they just come talk to me, but hey COVID. This happened to me too. My kids opened the door twice while I was in the bathroom. Ran the neighborhood. I got double key deadbolt locks and a barrel bolt at the top. Solved the problem. Technically my son's story, but I will share as he is still a minor. He had a friend over who was a little younger than him. My son was 10. His friend, 8. I asked the boy's mom if it was okay to run to the store. Rural neighborhood. Legally okay. Mature kids. She said it was fine. Took my youngest with me. My son calls me and says that I need to get home immediately. His friend had put on porn and wanted him to watch it. I told him I was on my way home and to tell his friend to turn it off. He said, "You don't understand, mom." He told me that his dad does that stuff to him. My heart sank. I called the kid's mom and had her come to my house alone. I told her that I had to report it whether she was going to move forward with it or not. I reported it to the state, mandated reporter in obvious duty. The mom pressed charges and now the bastard is in jail. I remind my kid how much of a hero he is. Sometimes he worries that he broke up a family but knows he did the right thing. Your kid is very brave. That must have been such a tough situation. I hope he realizes someday that he did something that changed his friend's life for the good forever. I had to call 911 while I was being babysat by my grandma as a kid because she had a stroke. I recognized the symptoms from the Babysitters Club. Fortunately, she made a full recovery and is still doing fine almost 20 years later. Claudia and Mean Janine and Claudia and the Sad Goodbye gave me the feels back when I was a kid. Some of those books had real talk storylines. I used to try and recreate Claudia's outfits for school using stuff I found at yard sales. I could not pull them off as well as she could, especially since this was in the early 2000s and her aesthetic wasn't exactly fashionable anymore. I do plan to watch the new Netflix series. So this isn't exactly babysitting, but I mean it was kind of free babysitting. But when I was 12 I was at the park and I met a girl my age and her and I were on the swings when this little 5 or so year old asked if she could play with us. Her dad was also there watching her. We wanted to be nice to her so we played with her for a little while. Pushed her on the swings, that kind of stuff. Well, when her dad said it was time to go home the girl made a fuss and started crying. Her dad had to basically drag her home. They were walking across the field, still in our sight, to their house when the dad picked up a large stick and hit her with it. He then carried the stick back to their home and tossed it in the garbage can when he got there. At the time I didn't own a phone, but the other girl I had met had one. I told her to call the police but she refused. I asked if I could borrow their phone and I would call the police. She agreed and I called then and told them what happened. About 10 minutes later they showed up to the house. I saw them look in the garbage bag and pull out the stick. Then they knocked on the door. IDK, whatever became of that. Brave of you to call the cops at 12. I had been doing in-home daycare back in the 90s. Had a 1-year-old girl whose parents were chain-smoking teenagers. Had to bathe the kid and do her laundry so I could breathe around her. One morning the crying teen mom drops her off saying she's leaving her abusive teen husband. She just needs an hour or two to stop by her work and pick up a few things for the long drive back to her mother's. I had no way to reach either of them. Meanwhile, a few hours turned into all day, then dinner time. My husband and I feared this baby might have just been abandoned on us. We debated how and when to call the authorities. Around 8 PM they both showed up together all lovey-dovey. A few weeks later they ended up in jail over an outstanding issue and I told them I was done babysitting. The kid ended up in foster care eventually. As a child who always reeked and got made fun of at school because of chain-smoking parents. Thank you for washing her clothes when you watched her and not just refusing to take her anymore. Even that doesn't get the smell out, but it helps a little bit. It was to the point that I knew I smelled but I couldn't smell it myself except on occasion. I am a babysitter and used to work at a daycare. The assistant director and I had to call the police once because a child was left behind over an hour after closing time. We were afraid her mom had been in an accident or something. Turns out there was a miscommunication between mom and dad regarding pickup. I really just think the dad forgot about her, as the mom was always the one picking up. It makes me sad to think that her dad forgot her. As sad as it sounds, it's easily done if it's not part of your usual routine and you have a lot going on to think about or are in a rush. I think most parents have a story about almost forgetting their kids somewhere. My parents were awesome and very attentive and forgot to pick me up from school once. Yes, changing the diaper of a 1-ish-year-old. Found cigarette burns. It was horrifying. My jaw literally dropped upon reading this. Do you know the fallout? Police report at our home where the babysitting happened. Kids directly to foster care. Mother arrested. It was horrible all the way around. I have no idea what happened after that. The child, 4, was running around naked and I was trying to clothe him and his sister, 6. Said it's funny when he comes naked to the table daddy sticks his pee-pee in his mouth. I asked her to elaborate and her twin sister elbowed her and said we aren't supposed to talk about that. Holy poop. Nicest family. So I thought. 2. Just seemed like your typical perfect American family. Mom was a nurse. Dad was an accountant. Had a beautiful house on the water. I never followed up. I was really young and felt bad, so when I called CPS I told them all I knew and said I want nothing else to do with it. There's 2 ways to get to my house and I always take the way that didn't pass their house, so I never had to know if the kids still live there or what happened. I got asked to babysit a 14-year-old problem child and house sit while his parents were in vacation. I'm a big, scary dude, so I didn't think it would be a problem. I showed up and after work, the kid had only been home by himself for an hour. There were at least 100 people in the backyard, aging from 13 to mid-20s. Almost everyone was drunk. Drugs were abundant. All the furniture from the living room was in the pool. People having intercourse in random open areas. I tried to get everyone to go home and some girl of indeterminate age offered intercourse to cool me off. Knopanope. I immediately got in my car, got the hell away from what appeared to be Sodom and Gomorrah and called the police. Then the parents. They arrived and broke it up. Arrested just so many people. Called about 1 million parents and arrested the son. The rest of the week was me, alone in the house trying to clean what I hope was not semen off of random walls and fishing out furniture from a pool to send to the dump. The kid had only been home by himself for an hour. There were at least 100 people in the backyard, aging from 13 to mid-20s. Almost everyone was drunk. Drugs were abundant. All the furniture from the living room was in the pool. People having intercourse in random open areas. As Afford Biblebrooks once put it, 10 out of 10 for style but minus several million for good thinking. I have nothing to add, however I am commenting because I want this further up the Reddit algorithm. Very bold move of you. This is going to backfire and become the top comment. Don't mind if I do. No, but I should have done so. I minded a little girl and her dad would come home drunk each night. He was a friend of the family and I wasn't in any fear whatsoever. But it just creeped me out that he was sloshed with an infant for the 2 hours he was home alone until his wife got there. I often would say, hey, I'm almost done with my homework. Mind if I stay? Instead of leaving just because some nights he couldn't stand up. And yes, he was driving this way. It was the early 80s. That is really admirable of you to stay. You did the right thing. It was probably my 3rd time babysitting this couple when they decided to have me babysit and go to local beer festival. They had 2 kids probably around 7 and 4 and were amazing the entire night and were very respectful. Around 11 PM I hear the parents pull up into the driveway and the car doors slam pretty loudly. I then began to hear shouting and the sound of someone screaming. I go to look out the window by the door and the parents were screaming and throwing rocks from the driveway at each other. At this point I'm freaking out because they are both clearly drunk and getting closer to each other. At one point the mom got so close and began taking swings at the dad, and at this point I decided to call the police. Police arrived and arrested both of them for drunk driving and assaulting each other. The kids had woken up at this point and were sobbing and I had to give statements to police and child protection services had to be called and I didn't even get paid for babysitting. I was later told the parents had gotten into a fight because the wife found out her husband had been cheating on her and met the side chick at the beer festival. They're divorced now and no longer have custody of the children, and apparently the side chick and husband are getting married next year. Jesus. I'm out of breath from reading that. Punctuation is your friend. Not me but my friend. Kid was doing crack in his parents' bedroom. The kid was ducking 14. I met a guy in a mental institution whose mom started doing crack with him at age 11. Not surprising he ended up there. My so-called mother did meth with my brother and I when we were young teens. Family bonding. I haven't called the police, but while I was active duty Navy, I had a shipmate who asked me to watch her son briefly. The diaper bag she left me with was filthy and all the bottles had mold in them. I contacted our chief. The Navy helped her. She was super overwhelmed as a dual military couple with 2 kids and a husband on deployment. She thanked me later. That's a much better ending than it could have been. My GF told me this story. Back in high school, she did babysitting as her job. There was this one kid she babysat who seemed to like her a whole lot more than his parents. The parents had a pretty nice house, with a few small things here and there but nothing too bad. One day, however, the kid says to my GF, "Let's go upstairs. I want to show you something cool." While they were playing, they go upstairs together, and rather than going to his room, they go into his parents' room, and over to their closet. He opens it and she sees 3 boxes absolutely full of heroin, weed, meth, and a whole bunch of other illegal drugs. My GF closed the closet, took the kid downstairs, and called the cops. The cops arrested the parent and took the child into protective custody. The only thing she knows now is that the parents are still in jail, and the kid is living with his grandmother. Man, imagine trying to show someone something cool and then some narc ducks up your whole life. I'm not even sure if that's sarcasm myself. Not me, but my mom. She babysat when she was a teenager, and one time she was babysitting these 2 young boys. The parents were dog trainers, so she also cared for the dogs while they were away. One time, the older boy grabbed a knife and threatened my mom and the younger boy with it. Luckily, those dogs were better trained than the kid was, and one of them jumped in between them and kept the kid with the knife away. I can't remember if she called the cops, but I heard that the kid ended up pretty out of it in his adult life too. I have something similar. I was allergic to most bubble baths and other soap products. My dad, being a single parent at the time, was accused by my doctor at the time of intercorsally abusing me. I remember when they had to examine me that they asked who I wanted in the room with me, and I bawled since they wouldn't let my dad in the room. Goddamn. Poor you. I had the same thing, and my doctor told my parents to bathe me with nothing but Castile soap for a few months, then had products one at a time to make sure they didn't disagree with me. The culprit turned out to be my beloved Power Ranger bubble bath. I have a related story. When I was little, kindergarten, the bus would drop me off at my babysitter's house after school every day. I don't remember much about this woman other than that she was absolutely nuts. She actually called the police on me one time. I was 5, because during cleanup time I pulled a pillow out from under some kid and he hit his head. I was just a cleanup fiend, but she legit tried to have the police file a report saying I assaulted one of the other kids, probably so she wouldn't be held liable if the kid had any injuries. IDK. The kid was literally fine, he just rolled backwards and hit his head on the carpeted floor, but he was sitting on the pillow on the floor, so it was no big deal. Anyway, while the lady and the police officer were talking, I was put in the back of the police car and I thought it was the coolest poop ever. My mother showed up a bit later and did not think it was the coolest poop ever. The police released me into her custody and all charges were dropped. JK, the police officer never wrote a report on that bull poop, lol. Not me, and no police was called. Sorry if this doesn't count, but my family is pretty sure my nanny had drugged me when I was little. I was born with a bad case of eczema that made it near impossible to sleep through the night. Hours of crying on end. It was exhausting for anyone taking care of me. They hired a nanny, and whenever that woman took care of me, nights were silent. My parents at first hoped it was cause my skin got better, but later was suspicious. They never did get an answer, as the nanny disappeared off the face of the earth after her final payment. When I was a young teen, I lived in a poor low-income area and there was a mom that had 2 little boys I babysat while she worked overnights. Initially, I admired the mom for her dedication and hard work. She was doing the best she could, and honestly my mom and home life were really bad off. I babysat for her quite a few years. She ended up meeting this loser and got pregnant. He was abusive to her, but especially the boys. It was sickening to watch. I ended up leaving the job because we moved, but I did call them in. I don't know whatever happened, but I often think of those boys and hope they're okay. I had to call the girl's parents. We were playing some video games and just joshing around. I nudged her with my hip and she fell off the bench we were sitting on. Only she landed hard on the floor, on her face, and she had a bloody nose lip. I think her tooth broke or chipped too. I felt so bad for that by the end of that summer we decided babysitting wasn't for me lol. Her mom came rushing home and took her to the ER. Everything turned out okay, but man, the guilt was real. 14-year-old me wasn't ready to deal with the blood and almost called 911. Not a babysitter, but I was babysat and my mom babysat a lot. One person that babysat me and a few other kids in the early 90s would just leave the house for a couple of hours, leaving us unsupervised. I remember her son would get knives from the kitchen and try to cut us with them, even going as far as to stab his dog. I don't think the cops or CPS were ever called, but I do remember the kid having a lot of issues as he got older, and was eventually arrested for molesting one of his family members. One family of kids my mom babysat when I was around 13 or so would always come over smelling like kerosene. Turned out their mom would pour it on them when they were bad. CPS did get called and they got taken away. Not sure what happened to them after that. I hope they are okay. I called CPS on my own stepmother and father. Father never did anything. Stepmother was a mental and physical abuser. She threatened to send me to my biological mother's, which's worse than me. I told her to do it. She treated my brothers like gold and forged my signature saying that I lied. She was her education teacher for after school programs. My mom does respite for foster kids, so basically babysitting for while the foster parents can't. Anyways, we were watching them. There were 4 girls and 1 boy, all under 13. Anyways, they started saying things in random conversation about what their foster parents who were friends of ours would do. The youngest girl, who was 3 at the time, had been molested by her mom's boyfriend and had behavioral issues. No poop. Anyways, the foster parent would punish this 3-year-old girl by forcing her to sleep on metal paws and wouldn't feed her. She would also scream in her face. That was only what they did to her. So my mom reported her and it caused a lot of drama. BTW, they now live with their dad who has been rehabilitated. They are doing great. We still babysit them from time to time. Not a babysitter, but when I worked for a furniture company, I discovered a foster family was abusing their foster kids and neglecting them and saying horrible things about them, especially the 4-year-old girl. The problem was that their case manager was their best friend. So I had to go above them and talk to family friends and state government. The county sheriffs in that area are trash. Ended up getting them removed as parents in the foster system. The caseworker went to jail, and the sheriff dept came under review for failure to act. It took everything I am not to drop that fat little ducker in his front yard. I'm a single dad and that little girl was the same age as my daughter, and the sweetest thing, I did learn that the little girl got adopted within a month of getting out of there, though, so that's a blessing. They actually wanted me to sit on the baby. Mrs. McTwitter, the babysitter. I think she's a little bit crazy. She thinks a babysitter is supposed to sit upon the baby. Shel Silverstein. Our babysitter called the cops because my brother was trying to get us in terrible do. He smashed a glass jar and cut himself up with the pieces. He almost lost an eye, slicing his eyelid open the whole time, just laughing his ass off about how we were going to be in so much trouble when mom saw him. Is he okay now? He sounds like a tiny psychopath. Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.